This I'm going to show you an example of a high school girl that I just recently worked with, which I think will help illustrate how I use the system. This was her initial measurement. So what I do before all of my sessions is I like to do an analysis, kind of a physical analysis on their, I take measurements, which I learned from Mike Adams from the BioSwing. Some anthropomorphic, how long their arms are relative to how tall they are. I measure how their grip, because I feel that your grip in your full swing should be very similar to your grip in putting. And so, how they position their hands. Some people like to hold the club. They put them, either way over or way under. And I think it should match when it comes to putting. I also believe that your grip pressure should match your full swing. I find that most putters will hold the putter too lightly, which I'll explain some of the errors that I see in the stroke that kind of illustrate that when it comes to putting. But this player, when I show them their screen here, they can see. I'm going to put my video on here so you can see me here too.
Just a comment, Kevin. So for the other participants, you have the chance to switch between the different screens now you see. So you can pop up either the screen share of Kevin or the video of Kevin. So it's up to you to find the right perspective relative to what you want to see. Okay. Sorry.
Yep. So looking at the screen here, I look at the overall, these numbers here, and anything when I start seeing them down in the 50s, I know there's something going on. I tend to find my better players, I kind of analyze it where if you're a really good putter, you're going to be somewhere around the 80 percentages or higher in all of this. So this player, I explained how your numbers are pretty low, and then I like to break it down. So when we go through at her setup here, you can see how she aims quite a bit to the left, anywhere from 3 degrees, actually 4 degrees to the left. I also explain, I measure on my system here, this is a 10-foot putt. So on a 10-foot putt, 1 degree equals 2 inches. So if they're aiming for the middle of the cup and they're 4 degrees to the left, so they're 8 inches off. So I explained you're aiming you're starting 2 cups to the left, and that tends to kind of highlight of how big of a miss that they're having, and they're like, wow. So it kind of brings it to aim. No one really knows in degrees. Like 2 degrees, okay, 2 degrees isn't really much, but if I say, well, 2 degrees is 4 inches, and they have a perspective on the cup, they're like, oh wow, maybe that far left. So it just kind of helps with perspective. And then, what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through the system and I'll say, okay, so you're starting on an average of 2.3 degrees left. And then at impact, you're on average 1.5 degrees open. So there's a big change in there. So she was having trouble with controlling where her start line and where the ball was going. And more importantly, what I'll get into here, if you look at the screen, is I'll actually break it down putt by putt. So I'm going to go to the single putt mode. I'm going to go to the first putt. So her first putt, she started 2.9 degrees left, and then she opened it up at impact 1.3. So she almost a 5 degree change in face angle, which is quite an enormous amount of change. And so I like to use the difference there between where they start and where they go to really illustrate it. The other thing we can also notice is her impact tends to be on the toe of her putter there, which will affect speed control. So I'll kind of go through the system like that with her and show her the comparison there. And then we'll show her the path. And this was one of the first things that I worked on with her. So I go to this number down here, this 0.56, the backswing ratio. You can see here in the grayed out area where the tour players tend to average somewhere between 3.5, 0.3 to 0.4, and she's at 0.56. And so when someone's backswing tends to be too long, it's, it's hard to control speed, so they tend to decelerate. When they decelerate, they have face control issues. So these were all things that were contributing to what we were finding. She actually tended to be okay with her speed, surprisingly, but she had really a lot of issues controlling where the ball started, and it affected her confidence. So in seeing that, this is one of the first aspects where we worked. She was relatively consistent with it, so it tells me that she knows what she was doing, but it just wasn't working for her and with her and how to control the face. So that was one of the first things that we went through. Something else that I do, just so you kind of get into my own mind here, as I go through this, I'm also a club fitter. I do a lot of fittings, and I think having an improper implement can affect the stroke. So I'm without letting her know, I'm paying attention to the putter that she's using. She's about 5'5", and she's using a putter that her father gave her. Her father's about 5'10". So it was a 34-inch putter that she really liked, but I felt like and it had a kind of a mid-sized grip on it. And I'm not a big fan of thick grips. I think the fatter the grip that you put on the club, the less feel that you have. Now, for some players, that's good because they get a little too handsy. So I understand going to a bigger grip helps control some of the fine motor movements of the hands. But I much prefer, this is my Scotty Cameron grip, just a kind of a thin little grip. You get it in your fingers a little bit more. I think you get a little bit more feel in your fingers when you putt. So, which the feel will have a lot to do with how she controls the face and actually the length of her stroke. She couldn't really get her hands on the club because the grip was too thick, so she had a kind of a long, slow swing stroke. And then it just affected everything else. You can see her impact spot was kind of out on the toe, which wasn't really good, and it was all over the place. I look at the launch. So this is where I found that you can see, if you look at this graph, you're like, okay, she's doing pretty good. She's hitting up on it. She's de-lofting the putter from where she started, and she's going to put a little topspin. So as I said before, her speed control was actually pretty good, but her directional control was a problem. As I continue through, I analyze it. I look at this graph here. I looked at how much she opened the club going back and closes. Wasn't too bad. The numbers going through here, relatively smooth face rotation. There's a little bit of a bounce here, and I'm going to say that's more because of the improper impact. So the SAM PuttLab is so sensitive that if you hit the ball on the toe, it makes the face twist, and that's what I'm seeing in here. There's sometimes where you'll see in there's a lot of, it's kind of a jagged line going through impact, and that's more because their hands are twitching, if they got the yips or something going on with their nervous system. But in her case, it was more just her hitting the ball on the toe of the club, which made it twist. So that, all these things were leading back to what I was pointing to at the beginning with the face aim and everything else. I'm just going to kind of go through this systematically, kind of how I go through it. I look at her face to path going through here, really pretty good. This one was closed or square all the way through. This one was square, a little bit open. So she's got control over it, but she just doesn't know where it's going because of where she started. And then going through her dynamics, she was really good with her acceleration, and her timing was really quite good. So when the acceleration and the timing's good, like I said, and her launch conditions were good, she's going to have good speed control. But what was throwing her—
Oops. Sorry. Sorry, Kevin, I have a problem with your sound. Can you unmute your sound, please, on the Sorry for that. Okay, we lost you. Sorry. Yeah, we lost you for some reason.
How far back did you lose me?
5 seconds.
Okay, so basically what I was just saying was when their control, so for her the dynamics, the way she moves the putter was pretty good. Her acceleration was pretty good. Her timing was really good. And her launch conditions were good. So here's a player, not even seeing her on the course, I can tell that she has pretty good speed control. But because she was misaiming quite a bit here, she affected her face going through, and so she had really poor directional control. So for this lesson, it was more for how to learn how to see the line of the putt and then how to square the putter up. We actually had to, I think your putter design has a lot to do with how you aim. I don't know if any of you have heard of David Adele, but David, I just listened to him on the Ultimate Golf Lesson that Mike Adams and Terry Rolls put on. And David has got a fantastic fitting system down to the point where it's, the shape of the head and the lines and everything affects the eyes. And I completely believe in that, where we had to actually change this player, how she set up to it, because the way she was setting up to the ball was affecting her eye line. I'm going to put my laser on here so you can see this. And so I like to put, can you see that laser there, Christian?
Yeah, sure, perfectly.
Okay, so I put a laser down just to kind of help her guide. And then when I started out with, let me get out of here. And I went into a training session with her. I'm just going to go live for a second. I already calibrated my putter. So we went live, and I had just the laser down and got her just to kind of line up the line on her putter and the laser and just kind of learn what straight was. I had to retrain her eyes. So by using the laser, I was able to get her to kind of see what straight was. And I would have her stare, and then I've got a screen here in front of me, and then she'd look up and say, okay, that was straight. And what we learned was she's right eye dominant. So I find right eye dominant players have to play the ball a little bit more centered in their stance, and then they have to stand slightly open. And by doing that, everything looked way left to her. So she re-aimed the putter face. The other thing that we had to do is the way that she uses her eyes, or the way she turns her head, was important. So I find a lot of players, when they look at the hole, they look at it like this. You can see how when I look, my eyes are off to the side a little bit. And so she had to change the way she looked at it so it didn't look so far off. She was actually looking to the right. So I had to teach her how to look left, and some of that was standing open a little bit. And then we did a training session, which I'll pull up here, and you'll start to see the progress that she made with her face. So as we go through, we did some training. So here you can see she's definitely still left tendency, just a little bit less as we went through it. Let me go to single. Let me get to the very first one here. I gotta get this out. Oops. Hide and hide. So this was one of the first ones. So after we did some training, she was able to find what zero was and hit some putts. Now, since we got her to aim better, it didn't, she didn't get the impact part right. So she was used to aiming left and then opening it up 4 degrees. So now she's aiming straight. She still opened it up 4 degrees. So it took us a little bit of time to start to coordinate where things, you'll start to see now she's starting to learn to get them both, a little bit less, a little bit, here and there. So it took a little bit of time for us to go through it. But the numbers started to change. Her her launch conditions didn't change. Her face rotation didn't change, but more importantly, she started to get, we also started to work on this, like I mentioned, her ratio. And for her, that was a hard thing to do. She felt like she was going back really short and then really far through. And I think it takes time for players to get acclimated to a lot of different changes, and seeing the positive, the results on the PuttLab when she'd make a putt, and all of a sudden she would see that she's 0.39. the correlation started to click a little bit faster. I think, Christian, I think you'll agree that when players start to see the changes and the immediate feedback that we get on the PuttLab was really very helpful for her. So if we just looked at that number, you know, she got very consistent numbers, especially here towards the end, where the most was 0.4, and she had it going in here a little bit better with her backswing ratio. When her backswing ratio started to get better, all the other, you know, all the other aspects started to change a little bit. So there's a whole process. This is just one example of what I was doing, but there was a whole process of everything going through it. I'll pull up another player here. What was her last name?
Kevin, maybe some question from my side for this player. So I think if I understood you right, you said, well, it is more a process where you need to guide the player into a more functional movement. Mm-hmm. Rather than saying right or wrong. It's more kind of experiencing, for example, different aim and the consequences to the stroke. So, which is more a process, like a fluid process, where you step by step recalibrate kind of the internal system of the player a little bit. Is this correct?
Absolutely. It's you know, they're changing, and most players, they want to change, but there's a resistance to change because they don't know what the outcome is going to be. So you have to kind of give them a little bit of leeway, especially since we were changing one thing that was really affecting a couple of other things. Well, we changed two. I changed her grip pressure, and then I changed her stroke. And this was a player, she held the putter very, very lightly because that's what her dad told her to do. But the problem is when you hold a weighted implement very lightly, it doesn't become part of the unit being your body. So it was moving a little bit independently, and that was affecting the face, which affected her feel, and then she lost control. So I had her hold the putter. I tell my players to hold the putter like they're swinging a 7-iron. And so what I find is immediately their stroke length changes, their tempo doesn't really change too much, but their length changes, and then the face stabilizes. And when the players start to feel the face stabilize, you can actually start to see the confidence kind of grow in them a little bit. If I were to just pull up a training session here, and you'll see, let me turn this off. So if I hit a couple of putts here, oops. Let me get out of this. Come on. Okay, so if I'm going to hold the putter fairly lightly and I make a stroke, so you can see how it went left. And if I pull up just the direction with the aim, so you can see everything. I started a little bit open, I got a little bit closed. Where's my rotation? You know, I start getting a lot of rotation, especially on the forcing. You can see I went from 8.5 to 10.2. And so I find that was actually a pretty good stroke. I guess it's hard for me to demonstrate badly. But I find the players get a little bit off, where if I held the putter just a little bit tighter, kind of my normal stroke, you'll see my tempo changes, that the ball started more on line. See how the face rotation got reduced, especially on the follow through. So that's kind of where I'll tend to see an immediate change with grip pressure, especially on the follow through, it'll change. You know, face to path tends to be good, but you'll see all this other information. Maybe my system's not, I may have to recalibrate again. But here you can see my stroke length on that swing versus the first one. That wasn't a great demonstration, I guess, but it just felt more different than it looked. I apologize for that. But you know, getting some pressure in there controls the face, controls the length of the stroke with the player. Then they start to feel more confident to hit it a little bit more solidly. And then, you know, her, like with this case with Isabella, her misses actually started to go a little bit to the right, because there were a few other aspects that had to catch up as far as changing in her path and in the face and stuff.
Okay, maybe one other question before you start another player. So as she was very much off with her aim, with her aim, and now what did she feel? So this is always important for me. Kind of what is she able to take home? Is it only a technical correction, or is she able to really feel what's going on?
She definitely felt the difference. I set up 2 alignment rods down for her to work on her alignment. So she was standing too far from the ball, which made everything look to the right. And then she started aiming, so everything looked to the right. So then she she pointed the face to the left. So I learned from Dr. Craig Farnsworth with the eyes, if you set up 2 alignment rods down the line, where I set up with the laser, that had about a foot gap. And I had her start really close to the ball. She said, okay, that looks left. And then she slowly backed up. She said, that looked good. And she backed up more. And she goes, that looks to the right, but that's where she normally stood. And part of it was because she's using a 34-inch putter. So I had her grip down on the putter, down to about 2 inches. She ended up moving closer. The alignment rods that I set down looked straight, and then everything started to come in. So she had a way to practice the way her eyes looked. I sent her a video on how to set up the alignment rods, so she can practice at home her distance from the ball, which then allowed her to see the line better. And when she saw the line better, it started to change her putter face. And then when her putter face got better, she started to, her stroke changed, and it's kind of like a blockchain thing here. Everything, one thing, a domino effect, one changed, the other changed, and everything else got into place. And then it becomes the trust factor, which is just through practice. As she started to practice more, she got comfortable with what she saw and how she felt, and her dispersion started coming in a little bit. I'm actually going to work with her again on Sunday, so it'll be interesting to see where she comes in. But she's been reporting back to me that she's pretty much eliminated her 3 putts, and her misses are much, much closer to the hole now.
Okay, I very much like that. Thank you.
I'll pull up another player here that I just recently had. Let me get her name here. Oops, O'Brien. So here's another player. This was her first analysis. Now you can see there's 2 analyses here. She had 2 different putters, if I can recall correctly. And let me get this out of here so I can. So here you can see she was a little bit better in her summary than the last player. But again, her main complaint was 3 putts. So here's the opposite. So here's a player that tends to aim a little bit too much or aims a little bit to the right, but I'm not going to say too much. Christian, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I like to see players, or if you see something different, I like to see players a little bit on the open side at address. I find no really great putters aims at 0. Everybody aims, I tend to see 1 to 3 degrees to the right, because that allows for some face rotation and some other things to happen in the stroke. So for this player, I thought her aim was actually pretty good. I just wanted to make sure she got more, I don't like these two inches to the right, somewhere around 1 degree, I think is 1 to 2 is the most for some players, but when she went through, she squared it up correctly to the target line. So she tended to start the ball pretty good. She had a lot of speed control issues. And then you can see how, so here, as we now analyze her, you can see how she goes through. She's got a tendency to have a reverse arc going through. I like to see players, this dotted line is kind of the target line, and I like the putter to work a little bit in to a little bit in. Everyone's got a different amount of arc to their stroke, I believe, because everyone's built differently. So there's always going to be some arc to it, whether it's a big arc or a little bit arc. And I don't teach players to go on an arc. It's just because you stand on the inside of the ball and the putter rests in here, the putter has to work on an arc. The longer the stroke, the bigger the arc you get. Now this was a tall player. She was 5'10", and she's got long arms, but she was actually setting up way down here like this. And as she went through, her putter would work out away from her, and it was affecting her face control again. Another face control issue, but this was a different reason. She saw the line correctly, but as you can see here with her putts, the putter would travel quite a bit out to the right going through, which then affected, she was hitting up on it, but she was adding a little bit of loft. She also had a putter that I had to adjust because she didn't have a lot of loft on her putter. She had about I think it was 1.5 degree. I forget what it was. Putt off was 4. Actually, it was the opposite. It started out with too little, and we added some loft to it to make it 4, which affected her sight lines a little. But as we continue to go through, she had really good control of the face. Her acceleration and all this other stuff was really good, but the arc of her stroke was getting off. And then, as you can see here, and then that was affecting her face control. So this was another account where, okay, so we got her lined up correctly. And as she's going through like this. And it's because her father, these parents, we got to get them out of golf, don't we? Her father wanted to keep her left elbow pointing to the hole as she followed through. So she'd go through and she kind of got like this. And as you can see here, where that moves the putter kind of up and to the right. So she was adding loft a little. She would complain about hitting it a little bit low in the face sometimes. So for her, it was, okay, let's get your arms kind of plugged into your side. And I got her a little bit taller. Again, she's 5'8" with long arms. So I got her a little bit taller. She was using, I think she was using a 33-inch putter when we started. I ended up getting her a 35-inch putter because she was able to get tall, get her arms out here. And immediately, as soon as her left arm straightened out, it went against her side, and her stroke started to work a little bit back to the inside. I'll pull up her training here. Then we go to her training session. You can see her path here. So you can see we started overdoing it on some of these, but like this one right here, let me pull up one. So you can see she started to slowly work it back around. Like these are the last few of the strokes. So you can see she's starting to have more of a left tendency. Some really good ones in there. So it's just like a process with them. And what I find with using the PuttLab is, I'll just kind of leave it here, is the immediate feedback was so helpful for the player. And I think one of the challenges for us as coaches is that I think the player wants to believe you. I mean, I've got a certain reputation, so that helps me a little bit, but the players want to believe you. But when it doesn't feel what they're used to, it's a little scary, because that's kind of what scares people into doing something over and over again, is even though they know it's wrong, they have a predictable outcome, even though they know it's wrong. Where when they make a change like this, for her, she felt like she was going to hit it way left, but the ball is actually going pretty straight. And so having the information like this right out in front of her, she'd hit a putt and she looks up, and then I use the system to confirm what she's feeling. Like I'll ask her, she'll make a stroke. Like, did that feel like it went straighter or more left? Did she see it? Yes. And then she look up at the screen here in front of her, and she'll see a stroke like this, and that starts to develop confidence with the player. So that was, it's a great training tool, I find, in having this immediate feedback with the system. So that was kind of it with that player. And we did a few more sessions, and this was the next day we did some putting. and you can start to see her tendency now is a lot of them there. Her tendency now was much less to the right, even more to the left. You can start to see some of her stuff in here. You don't see the strokes going way out to the right as much. I just kind of scroll through here. She's a little ADD, so sometimes she wouldn't pay attention to her aim. That's why some of these look like they're way off to the right. She's a player that I had to have her go through her pre-shot routine every time, which helped get her in there. But now you can start to see her tendency is much less out to the right. She's still a work in progress, but it's getting much better. Her face to path was a little bit better. Her launch conditions, she I don't love to see a lot of ad loft. So you can see here, I changed the loft on her putter. I went back down to 3 with her, which was a little bit better. She started hitting up on it. We're still, getting a little bit, we're kind of dialing in a little bit more. This predicted launch is still up a little bit too much. I like to see about 1 or 2 degrees up on the ball, especially with the greens that we play on. You can see her face rotation was still, except for this one, was still pretty good. And so that's kind of how I use the system. Let me pull this up. I'm going to go live here again, and I'll just kind of do a few putts and show you a few things that I look for. Let me just recalibrate this. I think someone might have hit it. Christian, any questions yet?
Well, yeah,
I hope I'm not going too fast.
No, I think I very much like the approach to just use this feedback to confirm what actually, if you work on a specific aspect and you feel the difference, that you also see objective information on the amount of difference, which sometimes is surprising for the player. And this type of self-organization is a very powerful. Well, it's even a part of our neuromuscular system that we can self-organize and recalibrate if there's appropriate input. So we know that. This is also true for perception. This is true for many things, even for heat sensitivity. So we can self-organize and recalibrate our system. And the thing we need is this accurate feedback, which is already in children so important. So I very much like the approach to guide a student through a process where you play around, kind of, even you're allowed to overdo it in one or the other direction, and then you always check, how does it feel, how much does it feel, and what's objective, the objective number corresponding to this. So this is
right. I think something you said there is important, is allowing the player to make a mistake. I think if they try to do it correctly all the time, you start to lose the feel between what's right and what's wrong. So I will have players, like, if they're aiming too much off, okay, let's aim too far to the right. And here you can see my screen, I'm aiming way to the right. And then I'll come back to straight. Okay, so what would straight be? Okay, there's straight. Okay, what's left? There's left. So when you start to, I call them bookends. If they know what too far to the right is and too far to the left is, you start to get a sense of where center is. Some people call it like Goldilocks, a little bit too much, a little bit, too little, and then you find the middle part. So I think that's important for players to understand, and the feedback here is important. One of the things I like about this is, if I go to the 3D, because a lot of players are visual, and when someone can see what their putter looks like, so here you can see the stroke. I like to put in the swing plane here, and I'll look at it from down the line. So I think this is a really cool perspective for somebody who's working on their path, to see how the trace of the putter, the yellow line, is in reference to the blue line, the actual plane of the stroke. So you can see I'm going out a little bit as I go through. And like, that's hard to see sometimes, but now I'm like, oh, that looks, I can see that now. That makes sense to me. So the player goes, oh, I need to stay a little bit more, to the inside going through. So then we'll have them do a putt. We'll do another putt, and we'll go in here, and they'll do a few practice strokes, and they'll get a sense of what what it means to arc off.
Okay.
Go ahead, Christian.
Oh, you are still in the project of O'Brien, but that doesn't matter.
What's that?
Oh, no, it's not. You're
All good?
just using the player as you're storing it at the player's data.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget to delete it afterwards.
Yeah, I won't forget. Yeah. So you get the player. So now they get a sense of, okay, so now they can kind of visualize the putter working even a little bit to the left here. I'm exaggerating it. And then they can hit a putt. And when they go through, I'll exaggerate it a little, they can feel that the arc of the stroke go a little bit different. So now when I pull that up, you can see here the path. So I definitely went a little bit to the left. And then I pull up that stroke here. Go to swing play. Let's play it. Oh, where'd it go?
Okay, this was not captured for some reason. Or maybe you
Oh,
need
there it
to.
is.
Okay, here it is.
Yeah, so there you can see how it went a little bit left if I look down the line. But that might be the same one.
Yeah, maybe you need to do another one. Just leave it open.
Let me hit another one. There, so now you can see how the putter arced differently going through. And so when I see that visual, like to me that felt way left, and when I look on it here, it's not that far left. So the players, so they start to get some, they correlate the feel with the visual of what the putter is doing, and it's just an immediate feedback for the player. Where I'll show it to them from there, and I also like to show it to them from their perspective, from this perspective, so they can kind of see how the putter works on a little bit of an arc going back and through. They can see the ratio of backstroke to forward stroke a little better, because this is how we see the ball when we putt. And I think the visual of this 3D aspect here is so important for learning and for the players. Someone asked me, they were interested in purchasing a system, and they said, well, how effective is it? And I said, I've had 100% of my students get better in something, which I think is a pretty bold statement. I don't think you can say that about everything that we work with in golf, that you have 100% improvement with something. Now, they didn't improve 100%, but something got better. They learned that they take away with this, and I can send them some of these files. So I think, just the information that they can get out of these systems, like there, I got 100% because I got the arc of the stroke better. Just the immediate feedback. It's such a great training tool. And for me as a coach, anytime that I could provide instant feedback that's accurate, I think that's something that's important, that we know that it's accurate is really critical and helpful to increasing the learning process for the students. Do I need a PuttLab when I teach? No, I don't. I can teach somebody without all this equipment here, but I find for me, I have some data now that the student has and that we can measure and track through it, so they get to see the progression of their improvement. They get immediate feedback. So to have information like this in front of me is going to help the student learn, so much faster. We call it a hyper learning center or hyper learning system for the player. And there's so much that you can do with this. There's games you can play. There's different aspects. I use it for club fittings because I find that the way the design of the putter will affect the way the player sees, which then affects the way the player hits the putt, whether it's the length, the weight, the hosel design, the shape of the head. There's some players, like for example, I had one student where we're looking down and they kept using the line on the ball. And I'm not a huge fan of using the line on the ball. If someone wants to do it, that's fine. I'm not going to take them out of it unless they can't line the ball up. And I think it's hard to sit down here. I'm going to try to do it here for you. I think it's hard to sit down here, line the ball up, get it at the right spot, and then you got to get your putter face to match up. So I got it. So I actually did pretty good. I only got it a half a degree left. I'm actually pretty good at it, I guess. I get some players will get down there, and I can tell from when they stand behind it and they kind of get up to the ball and they go like this. I'm like, wow. And as soon as I take the line away from the ball, they start to get it to look straighter. So having this feedback here is important. I had one player, as I was getting to, she kept looking at the front of the putter. I'm like, well, let's try looking at the back of the putter, and that changed the way she aimed. She kept aiming way to the left, and as soon as I got her to line up the back of the putter, her alignment went a little bit to the right, that 1 to 3 degree range that I'm looking for. So for me, everything's on the table when it comes to this. It could be no line, it could be a line, but using the system really helps us dial it in a lot faster versus kind of like let's try this and let's try that. It's once we get to see some of the changes that are happening, it helps dial in the shape of the putter and the hosel design of the putter when it comes to fitting, and then you're able to compare different putter system or different putters through the system and see which one's going to produce the best numbers for everything. Anything else you want to see, Christian? I would think.
No, I think this was fantastic. Very much like your approach, and certainly there are a lot of options. But yeah, just to take something home which is lasting, I think that's a big point, because we talk about transfer. So it's not about having a nice lesson; it's about taking something home where you learn something to improve.
Right.
And we know there's a lot of sense in feedback in learning. And so you might have a nice lesson and you might feel comfortable, but the next day out on the course, it's just the same. So this is a lack of transfer. And what we also think is that using accurate feedback helps to improve transfer.
Yeah, I agree. I think positive feedback, will build confidence, and we're just trying to, build some confidence in what the player, let them accept the changes. I can't force a player to change. They have to accept it themselves. I can tell them how great they're doing. I can show them how great it looks, but until they see the ball rolling differently, whether it's either starting on the line that they want to start it on or getting the right speed that they're trying to get it on, that's where the confidence is going to come into. So having them set up on the system and practice and hit a lot of putts. I would say a lot of the time on this is, I would say like out of a 1 hour session with someone, it's 15 minutes of coaching or teaching and 45 minutes of coaching. Kind of just reinforcing what we're doing, giving them drills. I'll actually I've got a screen right here in front of them, and I'll actually cover it with a blanket or towel. I'll have them hit a putt, and I want them to tell me, what was whatever we're working on. Let's say we're working on face angle at address. Okay, so you hit a putt. All right, tell me what the face angle was. Was it 1, 2, or 3? Or just tell me what it was, and then I'll pull it up and they kind of confirm it. And I'll get some players that are actually pretty good at it. And I can do that with any of the metrics on here. There's so many metrics on the system that we have to be careful not to overcoach and overuse them. But I'll choose, whether it be fake. I'm usually dealing with aim, a little bit of direction, or something with their rotation. And I'm like, okay, let me see you make a rotation that's too much, and then okay, did that feel too much? And then I'll show it to them. And so that kind of feedback is good. And then I start to go into ratios. I've learned a lot from Dr. Will Wu, who's a motor learning specialist out in California. And we start to do ratios of good to bad. And it's kind of like, I use a 3-to-1 ratio of 3 good motions to 1 bad. So I'll have them aim to the right or aim straight 3 times. Let me get straight there. We'll do that 3 times, and then they'll hit a putt, and then I'll have them aim incorrectly and then hit a putt so they can see the difference. And then I'll have them go back. Then I'll do it, and then we'll add, and then to get more advanced, we'll go to where we actually just kind of practice with the system on. Okay, so that's straight, step back out, come back in, and I'll use the system to kind of teach me what straight is again. Okay, there's straight, and then I'll go back to the 3-to-1. So then I'll kind of do it on my own. I'll put the cover over the screen so they can't see it. I'm monitoring it. And they're like, okay, that's good. Yep, they like it. They hit the putt. How was that? That was good. And then it'll show up here. So the face aim. So that was one close, even though they felt it was good. So then we go back, and then we kind of do a system like that, where eventually they really learn to hone it in. It happens fairly quickly, I find. And by the end of the session, they're able to do it on their own. And then I have them report back to me the next time they practice and see what they're doing, and if they have some way to measure it or someone helps them out. But a lot of my students, I have them get a laser so they can kind of see where they're aiming, or some kind of other device that measures it at their house. And it's really remarkable with how quickly they change. But even more remarkable is how they're able to do it under pressure. So whether it's in a round of golf or in a tournament.
Yeah. That's I think a very, very important point, because normally you would think, okay, this is an analysis system and you analyze a putting stroke and you get data. And what you explain now, it's much more. It's a learning system where you actually learn to do it differently, hopefully more functionally, and to take it with you and to recall it. And that's a completely different approach. And I think this is very, very important to understand that we don't really analyze, we just use the data to let our students improve. That's basically the concept behind this system, how we developed it. And so I think that's a very, very valid point. Well, thank you so much for this insight. Maybe there are some questions from our listeners. They might be already a little bit tired, but are there any questions to Kevin, please? Don't hesitate to ask. I will check in the chat.
Someone said, what is a laser called? So I use a laser. It's called the right putting dynamics. So I'll see if I can you see that there? So it's WRIGHT puttingdynamics.com. And he's got the one I have another one that has a remote control to it, so I can have the laser down there and I can turn it on and off. You can see the laser. It's a green laser, so it's very bright. It's actually very good. And that's the laser that I like. Mention my name if you happen to reach out to him too.
Okay, maybe.
But it's a very reliable laser.
Yeah, maybe you need to check the chat because I can't read your messages actually.
Okay. Let's see.
Something more?
Looks like that was, nope, he said, thank you. Is the Putt Station screen available, or is it a custom adaptation? You want to take that one, Christian?
Well, yeah, that's basically an extension which you can get through us. So it can be a touch screen where you can even operate just standing in front of the unit without going to the computer. So please contact us if you are interested in that.
Yeah, I find it to be a super helpful to have the screen right here in front of me. I'm actually in the process of looking to get a touch screen so I can control it right from here. But I think if you have the screen here in front of you, you have to be careful with your players.
Yes.
Because they'll start to look. They won't look downrange anymore. They're going to look at the screen to see if they're doing it correctly, and especially when you're going to measure them after the first time they've been on it. I find the first time people don't really pay attention to it because they don't know what they're doing. But once they see the screen and they know what to look at, when you measure them again, I find they look up. So you have to blank out the screen, whether you disconnect it or put something over it, because otherwise they will, they're going to use it as a crutch. And as I said before, this is a system that it's I like it to use it to answer a question, not to tell you what you're feeling. So I'll have them go in here and say, well, where does it feel like you're aimed? Well, it feels like I'm aimed pretty straight. When they look up, oh, that's that's to the right. So I wanted to confirm a feel, not tell you what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to use technology, no matter what kind of technology it is. I think you need to use it that way. And I think as some coaches and most players will use the system to tell them what they're feeling, because they'll hit a putt and they'll look up and say, how was that, instead of giving the feedback. So you have to be careful with that.
Okay, perfect. That was a good remark with the feedback. Yeah, don't allow them to really trace or track what they do. So sometimes you need to turn it off. So they need to learn to work with the data. Stuart Craig said, well, you can get some lasers from Visio Putting from Phil Canyon in Europe. That's yeah, that's true. They have a very good putter, very good laser also.
Let's see, 2 questions. Oh, this was 2 questions about curvature. What positionally do we care about the take when the unit is set up on a tripod instead of the putt station?
Okay, I answered that already.
Okay, so that's an old question.
That's already done. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So I think
we are fine, and thank you so much, Kevin.
You're welcome. Thank you. And if anybody has any, if anybody wants to reach out to me, Christian, they can. My email is just kevin@kevinsprecher.com. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything, or they can reach me through my website, which is just kevinsprecher.com. But I'm happy to reach out to them. Christian, thank you for having me on and participating in this. I think, as I've always said, you've got an amazing piece of technology here that really creates a great learning atmosphere for the player, and as a coach, it helps me teach people faster. So thank you for all that you do for us.